My name's Edward Higgs and I work in the History Department at the University of Essex. My main research interests at the moment are the history of information gathering, both by the state and also by private corporations, surveillance and the identification of individuals, including biometrics. My interest in information gathering, surveillance and identification comes out of the contrast between the modern world and the world in which I grew up. And the questions that I'm interested in answering are: why has that developed? Is it just changes in technology, or are there more deep-seated changes going on within our society and the relationship between individuals as citizens and the state and as customers and commercial organisations? Now, there are lots of theories about why this change has taken place, certainly why there's greater surveillance, not all of which I agree with. So what I try to do is to look at the history of how people are identified as citizens, as consumers, and also as private individuals signing documents and that sort of thing, over time, to see how these have changed. I mean, obviously one of the main forms of surveillance which goes on in our society today is CCTV. But there's also a problem now that CCTV is being linked up to facial recognition software. So it's not just a question of here's a large number of people walking down the street, it's that, oh, that is Edward Higgs taking part in a demonstration walking down the street. Or is it Edward Higgs walking down the road in the middle of a demonstration? Or is it Edward Higgs who's walking past the demonstration because he wants to get across the road to get to a bank? And how are those distinctions made? The first sort of impact I think this work on information gathering, surveillance and biometrics has is that it helps people to put their work into some sort of context. And I've been talking to members of the general public, students, but also to vendors of biometric information about the history of biometrics and information gathering. And they're quite receptive to discussing these things in terms of historical development, because one thing they're very conscious of is that different biometrics work in different cultural settings. Having a historical perspective allows them to think about what they're doing as culturally specific, and that there is something new about this, and they have to think therefore about how other people will react to that. I'm on the ethics committee of a group called the European Association for Biometrics, where people from the European Commission, academics, scholars and vendors of biometric systems are meeting together to talk about the ethics. Of course, what we all want to do is to work out what are the implications of these new technologies for privacy and for personal autonomy, especially within the context of data protection within the European community. And I'm also involved in other organisations. There's a thing called a COST initiative, which is a body which is set up by the European Union to actually advise them on the social implications of the introduction of biometrics. And I'm on the ethics committee of that body, which meets to discuss what are the limits to biometrics, what can be done, what can't be done. Are people able to revoke their biometric images and profiles, for example, which is in tune with the European Union's directives on data protection? So there's lots of people working in the area of policy, and an historical dimension is something which they find useful because, again, it contextualizes the present developments in biometrics. Biometrics are not a technology, they are a social force, and as such their ethical impacts need to be considered, and considered within the context of the legal systems that are being developed in Britain and also in the European Union.